I never thought that one day the person to whom I gave so much, my youth, my dreams, my freedom, would be the one who would betray me in the most despicable way. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. My name is Eva, I'm 22 years old, and I live with my parents, counting down the days until I graduate from college. It would seem that life should be simple, filled with activities, socializing with friends and dreams of the future, but reality turned out differently, and mainly thanks to my older sister Dana and her restless twins. Dana is 29 years old, she has her own house on the other side of the city, a husband, a stable life, and one would assume that having all these factors means being completely independent in raising her children. But things are different in our family, and since she had twins 4 years ago, I've become something of a permanent babysitter for them, a person who, regardless of her own plans and commitments, should always be there when her sister needs a little time for herself. It all started back when I was a freshman. I remember that day well, as if it were yesterday. The door slammed, and Dana burst into the room, out of breath, holding 2 tiny babies in her arms and dragging a bag full of diapers behind her. She gave me a pleading look and spoke quickly. "Eva, I have a very important meeting," impatience showed in her voice. "Could you look after them for at least an hour?" Before I could answer, she handed me one of the babies. The hour turned into 2, then 3, and before I could realize what was happening, dusk had already gathered outside the window, and I was exhausted, rocking one twin while the other was restlessly tossing and turning in the stroller. When Dana finally returned, she had shopping bags in her hands and a guilty smile on her face. "Thank you very much," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "You treat them so naturally." Since then, it has become routine. When she needed to run errands, go to meetings, or just take a break from motherhood, she drove the twins to me. Sometimes it lasted a couple of hours, and sometimes it dragged on for a whole weekend. I tried to explain that I have midterms coming up, that I really need time to study, but Dana just waved me off. "Don't be dramatic," she said, already putting bags with children's things in the living room. "They're mostly just sleeping. You can study while they're napping." But anyone who's ever sat with babies knows that's not how it works. Between the endless feedings, changing diapers, and the constant attention they required, studying became almost impossible for me. I hadn't seen my friends for weeks, and one day, when Dana once again picked up the kids only on Sunday evening, I couldn't stand it. "Dana, I also need some time for myself. I haven't been out for 3 days in a row." She just rolled her eyes, as if I was saying something ridiculous. "You have a lot of free time. Children don't occupy him that much." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "Besides, isn't that what sisters are for? We have to help each other." This phrase became her favorite excuse. She repeated it every time I tried to protest, when I reminded her of my studies, the need to do my homework, or just that I also have a personal life. For Dana, nothing could be more important than family, and so it went month after month, year after year, turning my student years into one continuous blur where babysitting duties were intertwined with desperate attempts to keep up with my studies. While my classmates went to parties and enjoyed college life, I learned how to type an essay with one hand, cradling a crying baby in the other. The twins had grown up, and now, instead of tiny, helpless babies, I was babysitting noisy, restless 4-year-olds. It would seem that Dana should have realized that now they require no less attention than before, but she argued the opposite. "Well, now they are much easier. They can walk, talk, and in fact, it's like having little friends at home." But her little friends still required constant supervision, entertainment, food, and care. They still occupied every minute of my time, whether it was trying to climb a bookshelf or marker-painted walls in the living room. Graduation day has finally arrived and passed, the very day I was looking forward to so much, not believing that after 4 long years of endless juggling with studies and impromptu babysitting duties, I would finally be able to call myself a certified specialist. This day was filled with emotions, The joy of realizing the completed stage of life was mixed with a slight sadness from the impending separation from friends with whom we had experienced so much together. The whole day was spent in a rush of congratulations, photos, hugs, and plans for the future, and when the official part of the celebration was over, my friends and I decided to celebrate this event in our favorite cafe, a place where over the past years we have spent countless hours studying, discussing educational projects, and dreaming about what awaits us ahead. So what awaits each of us? Sarah asked, stirring her latte and giving us a curious look. We'll all go our separate ways soon. Someone will go to another city, someone will get a job, someone will continue their studies, and that's exactly what Rachel seemed to be thinking about, who suddenly eagerly intervened in the conversation. That's right, we'll soon fly to different parts of the country, so I wanted to talk about one thing. We should do something together before everyone goes their separate ways. The last adventure, as a memory of our student years. I thought for a moment, and then, feeling a long-forgotten feeling of anticipation for something special ignite in me, I suddenly suggested, "What about Italy? I've always wanted to go there." The idea flared up like a spark in the dry grass. At the same moment, a lively discussion began at the table. Someone enthusiastically started talking about Rome, someone remembered Tuscany, someone began to vie with each other to suggest routes, discuss sights, and fantasize about walking through the narrow Italian streets. Everything seemed so incredible, but at the same time so temptingly possible, especially after my grandmother, proud of my achievement, gave me $5,000 as a graduation gift. "Look at these ticket prices," Jessica exclaimed, bending over the phone. "If we book them right now, we can get really great deals." We spent the next few hours planning our trip, thinking over everything down to the smallest detail: routes, hotels, places to visit, and transportation that would be more convenient to use. By the time we left the cafe, we had already booked tickets and hotel rooms, and the anticipation of the adventure filled me with such joy that I hadn't felt in a very long time. When I returned home that evening, my parents invited Dana and her family to dinner in honor of my graduation, and I couldn't wait to share my exciting news. "Italy," I said as soon as I sat down at the table. At the same moment, there was a clink of a fork on Dana's plate. She looked up at me in surprise and frowned. "When exactly are you going to leave?" "The second week of July," I replied, taking a bite of my mom's lasagna. We came across amazing ticket offers. I noticed how Dana's face took on a strange, almost alarming shade. "In the second week of July? Are you kidding?" I looked up, confused by her tone. "What's wrong with July?" "That's when Tom and I go on a trip," she replied, staring at me intently. "You knew about it, and you did it on purpose." I blinked, not immediately understanding what was going on. "What?" "I didn't know." "You definitely did it on purpose." Dana's voice was getting louder, accusatory. "You're trying to avoid looking after the twins while we're gone." I put down my fork, feeling all my enthusiasm for the upcoming trip instantly evaporate, replaced by growing irritation. "Dana, I really didn't know about your trip. We just planned everything today." "Well, then you need to cancel everything," she said firmly, crossing her arms over her chest. I looked at her incredulously. "What?" "You can go to Italy at any time. We've already booked everything, we've got everything planned, and we need you to look after the kids." I could feel the blood rushing to my face. "I can't cancel." My words sounded harsh, but I wasn't going to give in. "I've already booked everything, too. Besides, this is my only chance to travel with my friends before everyone leaves." "Don't be ridiculous," Dana said. "Your friends will still be around. And my trip is more important. It's been so long since I've been on vacation. You should stay and look after the twins." I took a deep breath, trying to control my emotions, and met her angry gaze across the dining table. "I'm not changing my plans, Dana. Everything is already booked and planned. You can book as many as you want, it's ridiculous. She replied sharply. You're being completely selfish. The word selfish hung in the air, cutting through the silence, and I felt the anger inside me grow, spreading heat throughout my body. I spent the last 4 years giving up everything when Dana urgently needed a babysitter, postponing my business, canceling plans, adapting to her requests because I understood that it was hard for her alone with the twins, but that didn't mean that my life should always revolve around her problems. Now that I had perhaps the only chance to travel with my friends before we finally split up in different cities, I couldn't afford to give up on my dream again. I looked up at Dana with a mixture of resentment and hardness. Do you understand that we will never have such an opportunity again? My voice sounded steady, but everything was boiling inside. Dana slammed her palm on the table with such force that the cutlery rattled, and Mom jumped nervously. What should I do with the twins? Have you thought about it? Her voice was trembling with indignation. I opened my mouth to reply, but she didn't give me a second. Mom and Dad are too busy. She blurted out, casting a quick glance at her parents as if seeking confirmation from them. Mom wanted to say something, but Dana interrupted her without even giving her a chance to explain. Mom works overtime in the office, and Dad is still recovering from health problems. Do you know that? I turned my gaze to my father, who was silently moving food around his plate, avoiding eye contact. He did look tired lately, it's true, but it was clear to me that Dana was manipulating the situation as skillfully as she always did. There is a simple solution, I tried to speak calmly, despite my growing irritation: hire a babysitter. An expression of absolute disbelief flashed across Dana's face, and then she laughed harshly, briefly, mockingly, angrily. The babysitter? Her eyes narrowed. I don't trust strangers with my children. Besides, we're saving up to buy a house, and we don't have the extra money to spend on a babysitter when you're quite capable and free to look after them. I crossed my arms over my chest, clutching my sweater sleeves with my fingers to keep from wanting to throw something. If you can afford a vacation, I said, you can afford a babysitter. Dana sighed, leaning back in her chair in annoyance. It's not the same thing. Her voice became more assertive, almost pleading. This trip is important to our marriage, Eva. Tom and I need to spend time together, and I was counting on you. I recognized that tone. Such a familiar shade of guilt, imbibed from childhood, which she used so skillfully. There's no problem, Dana continued, more softly, but there was an order in her words anyway. You just need to stay with the twins, like you always do. It doesn't really matter. Something inside me clicked. It doesn't really matter. I repeated slowly, and a bright, hot anger flared up in my chest. You know what? I'm not arguing about it anymore. I've made a decision. I'm going to Italy. Eve, no. I stood up from the table, feeling my hands tremble with tension. I've spent years trying to rebuild my life for you. The words came out by themselves, accumulating in his chest like an avalanche that could no longer be stopped. I missed parties, study groups, time with friends because you needed a babysitter. Not anymore. You're not going to make me feel guilty about this trip. It's not about guilt, Dana replied sharply, her face flushed with rage. It's about family responsibility. I smiled bitterly. What about your responsibility as a parent? I retorted. It's not my job to provide you with free childcare whenever you want it. If you need someone to look after the twins, hire a babysitter. There was a tense silence in the room. Dana sat with her mouth open, as if she couldn't believe that I had actually said that. I'm going to Italy with friends, and this is final. Dana's face turned a frightening shade of red, her lips trembled with anger, and her fingers dug into the tablecloth so hard that her knuckles turned white. She opened her mouth to protest, but I was already moving away from the table. I've let her manipulate me for too many years, play on my guilt, hide behind big words about family obligations, but this time I chose myself. The next 2 weeks in our house were unusually quiet. My parents tried not to interfere in the quarrel between Dana and me, only limiting themselves to restrained remarks that we should figure it out on our own. The silence from Dana was deafening. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits to leave the twins at least for a couple of hours. Everything was supposed to be peaceful. But instead, it was like the calm before the storm. I spent days packing and carefully preparing for the trip, trying to ignore the dull anxiety that tightened my stomach with each approaching minute. I tried to control myself, to convince myself that I was making the right choice, but something inside was bothering me, like a premonition, vague, lingering, but persistent, that I couldn't get rid of. The day before I left, I was checking my checklist for the last time, skimming through the items, when I suddenly realized that I had forgotten to buy some absolutely necessary things, small things, but I couldn't do without them. "I'm going to the store," I shouted to my mom, already grabbing the car keys. "I need to buy some last things for tomorrow. Just for a little while," she replied from the kitchen. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it, and ran out the door, trying not to linger. The store was crowded, as if everyone had decided to shop at the last moment before some kind of disaster. Groceries, household chemicals, packages of clothes were piled up in carts. People were fussily wandering the aisles, bumping shoulders, arguing at the cash registers. I made my way through the crowd, deftly grabbing what I needed and checking the list, trying not to linger or be distracted by the tempting storefronts. In the end, an hour later, tired but happy that I had bought everything I needed, I returned home. But as soon as I crossed the threshold, everything inside me became alert. It was too quiet. But in that silence, I still caught a faint, ringing, familiar laugh. Children's laughter. The twins' laughter. My heart started beating faster. I recognized the sound immediately, the joyful, bubbly voices of Jake and Mike. But why are they here? Dana hadn't come to see me for 2 weeks, and it seemed to me that she was avoiding me after that quarrel. I rushed into the living room and froze. My nephews were sitting cross-legged on the floor, clutching their bellies with laughter, and their little hands were clutching something that made my blood run cold. My passport. No, no, no. I lunged forward, snatching the document from their hands, my fingers shaking as I opened the tattered pages. Panic flared up inside. Please let everything be okay. Please, please, please. But it wasn't okay. There was nothing wrong with that. I flipped through the pages convulsively, and I felt cold. There was a jagged, ragged hole where my photo should have been, the edges neatly cut out with scissors, as if someone had worked hard to destroy my passport. Colored scribbles dotted the pages. Red, blue, green, and purple stripes of markers crossed every letter, every official stamp and visa, turning the document into a bright, chaotic mess of children's creativity. My throat tightened. I couldn't breathe. And then, before I could stop myself, I screamed. A scream escaped my lips, deafening, filling the room with despair and impotent rage. All the tension, all the fatigue, all the emotions that I had been holding back during these weeks burst out, sweeping away the last remnants of calm in an avalanche. Hot, burning tears rolled down my cheeks as I stared at the mutilated document, clutching it in trembling fingers. My passport, I croaked, my voice trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching the ruined brochure to my chest, as if I could regain what I'd lost. It couldn't be true. Not now. Not when my dream was less than a day away. The sound of my scream echoed through the house, bouncing off the walls like multiple echoes of my shattered hopes for Italy. I sobbed, pressing my palm to my forehead, looking at the destroyed passport, feeling panic and powerlessness squeeze my throat. And then I noticed something else. There wasn't a single adult in the room. No mom. No dad. Neither are given. The twins were alone here. And I suddenly had a terrible, chilling question. Where did they get the scissors? I looked up sharply when my mother appeared in the doorway, followed by my father, followed by Dana, with a confident gait. They burst into the living room, attracted by my screams, their faces worried and wary, but one look at Dana was enough for me to understand that she wasn't worried about me. I picked up my passport, my hands were still shaking. "Look what they've done," I croaked, my throat constricted by sobs. "Look at my passport." I expected to see shock on Dana's face. I expected at least a glimmer of guilt, the realization that something terrible had happened. But she didn't look surprised. Not a drop. There was no regret on her face. She crossed her arms over her chest, and then slowly, lazily clicked her tongue, like a person watching a stupid child who is to blame for his own troubles. "Eva, you really need to be careful with your important documents," she said in a tone that was both condescending and slightly irritated. I was speechless. "How many times have I told you not to leave things lying around where children can take them?" Her voice was cold and calm. I stared at her in complete disbelief, trying to comprehend what I had just heard, until she, with her usual equanimity, turned to her parents, and her voice, a moment ago filled with icy reproach, suddenly became calm, reasonable, as if she were discussing not my ruined plans, not a document ruined beyond recognition. It crossed out my dreams, but something insignificant, like the weather suddenly turned bad or an accidentally broken plate. "You know how careless Eva can be," she said with a slight note of condescension, addressing Mom and Dad as if they were all discussing my childhood habit of losing mittens, and not my future, which had just crumbled into dust. She probably left her passport on the bed or somewhere else, and the twins just found it. They're so curious. Well, of course they wanted to play with him. I jerked my head up, my chest boiling with seething, uncontrollable anger, which was getting hotter by the second. "Are you kidding?" I jumped up from the couch, not noticing how my leg was trembling treacherously with rage, barely restraining myself from screaming at the top of my lungs. "It's impossible. I never leave my things unattended, especially when the twins are here." I could feel the blood rushing to my face and my heart pounding in my temples, because I knew perfectly well how to keep important documents, especially in this house, especially next to her children, and I had learned this lesson in 4 years of endless part-time work as a nanny when she needed to go somewhere. And her reliable younger sister had to sacrifice her time for the sake of her family over and over again. But Dana just raised an eyebrow, a picture of innocent confusion flashed across her face, and for a moment it even seemed to me that she was genuinely perplexed. "Well, obviously you haven't learned it well enough," she shrugged, pretending to even feel a little sorry for me. Something inside me broke. I took a deep breath, but my voice was getting louder, filling the room, echoing off the walls, full of pain and indignation. "Oh, it's so rich to hear it from you. If I'm such a careless person, if I'm as irresponsible as you just hinted, then why do you always leave your children with me? Why do you trust me with your precious twins when I'm not even capable of taking care of my own paperwork?" Mom and Dad watched us in silence, their eyes darting from me to Dana, as if they were trying to keep track of a tennis ball flying from one side of the court to the other. I saw concern in my mother's eyes, her lips twitched, as if she wanted to say something, but changed her mind, and my father stood with clenched fists, his jaw clenched, as if he, too, was trying to cope with surging emotions. They had never seen me in such a state, never heard me speak in such a tone, with such despair and rage, and from this a heavy, oppressive silence hung in the room. But I wasn't going to stop. "And one more thing," I took a step forward, looking Dana straight in the eye, not letting her turn away. The anger inside me grew like a thunderstorm, like an unrelenting storm, ready to hit everything in its path. My passport was in my suitcase. In a locked suitcase. And inside, it was in a zippered protective pocket, inside a folder, along with other documents. "Are you really trying to tell me that your 4-year-old kids managed to hack all this on their own?" I kept my eyes on her, catching every movement of her face, searching for the slightest glimmer of emotion, the slightest hint of the truth. And for a split second, I saw him. Fear. A faint glint in her eyes before she hurriedly hid it, putting back on that damn mask of calm concern she'd worn all her life. The one that allowed her to get out of any situation. The one she used when she asked me to look after the twins for a couple of hours, and then disappeared for 2 days. "I do not know how it happened," she said with perfectly measured slowness, as if she was considering each word, choosing the most convincing wording. "But children, they can be very resourceful when they want something. However, there is no point in looking for the guilty. The fact remains that you weren't careful enough with your paperwork. The twins are only 4 years old. They cannot be responsible for this. You're an adult, Eve. It's your fault." Her voice was soft, almost affectionate, but there was a cold calculation in every word. And at that moment, I understood. I understood everything. For all these years that I gave in to her, for all these years that I allowed myself to rebuild my life according to her convenience, cancel my plans, miss my opportunities, I finally realized who she thought I was. She never saw me as an equal. I was comfortable for her. I was a resource to her. Dana turned to her parents, and her voice immediately filled with feigned sympathy, which I was sure would not deceive even them. "Well, since Eva can't go on her trip now, we have a great solution," she said, as if it had all been planned in advance, as if everything had turned out just perfectly. "She can look after the twins while Tom and I are on vacation. Everything is working out just fine." She smiled. That smile. The one she used countless times when she deftly shifted her responsibilities to me, skillfully hanging them with the words, "Well, you're free anyway. It's just for a day. You love children so much." The room spun before my eyes, and I felt nausea rising in my throat. I couldn't stand anymore. As if in slow motion, I collapsed back onto the couch, heavy sobs bursting from my chest, shaking my body, tearing at my heart. Through the tears that filled my eyes, I saw the expression on my mother's shocked face, saw how my father's clenched jaws tightened, saw how their gazes darted between Dana and me, but they were silent, as if they did not know what to say. And in the corner of the room, silent, as if suddenly realizing that they had caused something terrible, stood Jake and Mike, their small faces expressing complete bewilderment. They looked at their mother, then at me, clearly not sure if they had done something wrong. After what seemed like hours, but probably only minutes, I managed to catch my breath, and suddenly a strange, almost icy calm enveloped me, as if the storm raging inside had finally exhausted all its destructive power, leaving behind only emptiness and the realization that I had nothing more to lose. I looked up at my father, and it seemed to me that in his face I saw something more than just severity or condemnation. I saw in him the same feeling of fatigue that I felt now myself, fatigue from endless injustice, from betrayal, from forced silence that lasted too long. "Dad," I managed hoarsely. My voice was still hoarse, like from crying, but there was no weakness inside, no self-pity, no desire to swallow everything again and pretend that nothing had happened. Dana did it. She organized it all. These little boys couldn't get into my suitcase by themselves. I could see my hands shaking, but my voice was steady, because now there was nothing left that could make me become an obedient younger sister again, the one who always adapts, gives in, forgives, swallows resentments and continues to carry on someone else's burden. But as soon as I finished my sentence, Dana's sharp, high-pitched laugh cut through the tense silence of the room, making me flinch as if someone had slashed me with an invisible knife. "Oh, please," her voice dripped with condescension, and I knew that was the tone she always used when she wanted to make my words sound stupid, ridiculous, frivolous. "You know how that sounds, right? You're accusing me of that, such an absurdity. It's just ridiculous. If you want to make such serious accusations, you need to at least prove them before throwing them around. Where's your proof, Eve?" Her confidence was absolute. It was the confidence of a person who was used to getting away with anything, that he could get out of any situation because everyone around him either didn't want to or was afraid to expose him. I was about to answer, but before I could open my mouth, Dad spoke up. His voice was quiet, but there was such a hardness in it, such a steely tone, that even Dana, accustomed to the boundless patience of her parents, suddenly tensed up. "Jake, Mike, come to me for a minute." He bent down slightly to be on the same level with his grandchildren. His kind, always warm eyes were now looking at them with unusual seriousness. "Boys, tell Grandpa, where did you get Aunt Eva's passport?" The twins looked at each other, as if they didn't quite understand why they were being asked to do this now, but after a moment Jake stepped forward, bouncing slightly on his toes, as he always did when he couldn't wait to tell something. "Mom gave it to us," he announced with pride, as if he was bragging about something important. "She said we were going to surprise Aunt Eva." Mike nodded enthusiastically, not wanting to stay away. "Yes. Mom said that Aunt Eva has an ugly photo in her passport, and we have to cut it out." My breathing stopped. "She gave us big scissors from the kitchen and markers," Jake continued, his face glowing with memories of the fun game. "She said that we can make the passport beautiful, with lots of colors. She said Eva would be so happy." Silence fell over the room, heavy, suffocating, broken only by the monotonous ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner, the sound of which had seemed so familiar to me before, but now it suddenly became unbearably loud. Dana's face paled. I saw her former confidence evaporate, as the mask of composure began to crack, as her lips twitched slightly, and for the first time in all this time, she did not find what to say. Mom put her hand to her mouth in horror. Her eyes darted between us, as if she was seeing us both for the first time, as if she had just realized who her daughters really were. And Dad's face turned to stone. I've never seen him like this before. His previous patience, his endless desire to be fair, was suddenly replaced by something else, something heavy, something unyielding, something that made even Dana take a step back. And that's when something happened that is forever etched in my memory. My father, the man who had never raised his voice in all my years, suddenly exploded. "What's wrong with you?" His roar tore through the air of the room, making everyone shudder, even me. The twins, who had just been happily sharing their memories, clung to each other, their eyes widened in fear, and I realized that this was the first time they had seen Grandpa like this. Her face turned white as chalk, and she took a step back again, as if hoping that the distance between her and her father's anger would help her hide, dissolve, disappear. "Dad," she began, but he abruptly raised his hand, stopping her before she could try to justify herself. "Don't you dare." His voice was trembling with rage, his hands clenched into fists, and at that moment I suddenly felt afraid, not for myself, not for my ruined plans, not for the passport I no longer had, but for her, for Dana, because I suddenly realized, for the first time in my life, I stumbled on the limit of what was allowed. "This is not just some kind of childish joke, Dana." His voice, though quieter, did not lose its destructive power. "You deliberately destroyed your sister's passport. You manipulated your own children to help you disrupt her trip." And suddenly I saw something I thought I'd never see. I saw that my perfect, self-confident, manipulative older sister was finally scared. Mom hugged the twins to her, as if trying to shield them from the tense, air-splitting confrontation that was playing out between Dad and Dana at that moment, but the children, although scared, already realized that something important was happening, something that would change our family forever. I sat frozen on the couch, unable to move, unable even to breathe freely, because in front of me was a spectacle that I could not have imagined even in my wildest dreams. My father, always calm, always fair, venting out the accumulated disappointment over the years, the heaviness that he probably carried it in his heart, not letting it break out until he finally ran out of patience. "We've always helped you, Dana," his voice, though not raised, cut through the air like a blade, enunciating each word with unrelenting clarity. "Your mother and I tried our best to support you. Eva sacrificed all her college experience to be your personal babysitter, and you." He paused, but there was more in that pause than in any of the words he said, "And this is how you repay her kindness, by acting like a complete lunatic." Dana's lips trembled, and for a moment her self-confident mask cracked. Something like fear appeared in the corners of her eyes, but as soon as she opened her mouth to speak, her father beat her to it. "Did I just meet you?" His laugh was better, full of mockery at her pathetic attempts to justify herself. "You've crossed every line that can be crossed, but let me tell you something." He took a step forward, and I saw Dana instinctively step back, facing for the first time in years the anger of a man she considered infinitely patient. "The agreement we made to help you buy a house?" His voice was low, cold, and there wasn't a drop of the softness I used to hear in it anymore. "Consider it cancelled." I watched as the color slowly drained from Dana's face. Her lips parted in silent shock, and for a moment I even felt sorry for her, but this feeling immediately disappeared as she took a desperate step forward. "No, Dad, please," her voice, always so confident, trembled. "These $200,000. You won't get them anymore," he snapped, and it was clear from his tone that there was no turning back. "I'm giving them to Eve instead. She can use them to buy her own apartment, away from your manipulation and control." Dana gasped as if he had hit her. Her hands were shaking, and her gaze darted between her parents' faces, seeking support where it no longer existed. "As for you," my father continued more calmly, but this calmness was more dangerous than loud anger, "you will receive your inheritance when I die. And not a day earlier." Dana burst into tears. Black streams of mascara flowed down her cheeks, turning her immaculately groomed face into a mask of despair, and in a last, frantic attempt to save the situation, she turned to her mother. Her eyes full of pleading met her eyes, but her mother only slowly shook her head. "I'm so disappointed in you." Her voice was quiet, but every sound cut into my heart like a nail. "Dana." "Mom." Dana tried to take a step toward her, but her mother pulled away, and there was more condemnation in that movement than in any words. "I never thought you'd do something like this," she sighed, her eyes clouded with sadness. "I don't even recognize the person you're becoming." There was silence. It was dull, heavy, and soul-rending. I turned my gaze to the coffee table, where my ruined passport lay among family photos and randomly scattered papers, a mute witness to what had just happened, a symbol of everything that had collapsed in our family in those few minutes. Of course, I couldn't go to Italy the next day. My dream, my trip that I had been planning for so long, was actually cancelled, at least for now. But my friends, having proved that they were the best people I knew, refused to go without me. "It's been a week," Sarah said when I called her to tell her everything that had happened. "It will take a couple of months to get a new passport," I sighed, still stunned by their dedication. "We'll wait," she replied simply, and I heard Rachel break into our group chat. "Italy has been around for thousands of years," she wrote. "It can wait a little longer." Jessica had already started researching how to change our reservations, and it soon became clear that most airlines and hotels have flexible policies, so although we might have lost a small commission, it was nothing compared to the joy of knowing that our dream would come true. And while my sister was trying to ruin my plans, my friends proved that a real family is not always based on blood, that sometimes a family is those who choose to wait for you, who refuse to let someone's selfish feelings destroy your dreams. Some time later, I finally boarded a plane to Italy, holding a new passport in my hands, which now symbolized for me not just a document, but freedom, a new stage, independence. My friends managed to rebook everything with minimal losses. A few hundred fines for changes were nothing compared to the fact that our dream trip was preserved. "I still can't believe we're really here," Sarah said as our plane took off, and I squeezed her hand, feeling warm and grateful for those who stayed by her side, who didn't betray, who waited. Italy was everything I dreamed of, and even more. We wandered through the ancient streets of Rome, admiring the Colosseum, throwing coins into the Trevi Fountain, spent hours in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and then climbed to the top of the Duomo, enjoying the view. But perhaps the most magical place for me turned out to be Venice, its canals, its reflecting golden water at sunset. "This ice cream alone was worth the wait," Rachel said, smiling. One afternoon, when we were sitting by the Spanish Steps, enjoying the soft warmth of the Roman sun and watching the passers-by who, like in a kaleidoscope, alternated between hurrying about their business and stopping to take photos, I found myself feeling light for the first time in many years. That lightness, which brings only true freedom, freedom from obligations, from the whims of others, from the endless need to be in someone's service, sacrificing their own desires and dreams. I looked at our pictures, at the laughing faces of my friends, at that special sparkle in their eyes that only happens when a person is truly happy, and with a smile I said, "These photos will make amazing Christmas cards." But the best part wasn't even the sightseeing, the endless walks through the narrow streets, or the aroma of freshly brewed espresso that was in the air, but the realization that I was finally living the way I wanted to, that I no longer had to constantly check my phone waiting for another message from Dana. That there are no more last-minute emergencies involving the babysitter, her insistent demands, her manipulations, her ability to take over other people's time and resources under the guise of family care. Just me, my friends, and the adventure we planned together. When we returned home, everything changed dramatically. The parents' house, which had previously been in chaos caused by the twins' endless running and Dana's demanding voice, was now quiet, almost unusually calm. Aura's demands no longer echoed through the corridors, did not drown out their own thoughts, did not weave into everyday life, making it an endless marathon in an attempt to satisfy other people's whims. Dad had already started transferring money for the house to my name, not to Dana's, and this gesture was more than just a financial decision for me. It was a sign of recognition, confirmation that I could finally manage my life without looking at anyone's expectations. I found a beautiful 2-room apartment near the city center, a cozy place filled with light, with windows overlooking the old Linden Alley, with a small balcony where I could drink my morning coffee without fear that someone was about to demand my time or attention. One morning, after returning from Italy, I was sitting in the kitchen with my mother, enjoying the aroma of freshly brewed tea, and I said, looking out the window at the sunlit streets, "This is the perfect place to start my new life." Mom smiled, her face, which had often seemed tired in recent years, now looked relaxed, as if along with the chaos that Dana brought, something heavy had left her life, pressing down on her shoulders with an invisible weight. "Your father and I are so proud of you, darling," she said, covering my hand with hers. "You handled everything with such grace." Dana hasn't been home since the incident with her passport. Mom still called her from time to time, kept in touch, but, according to her, kept her distance. Dana quit her job, deciding to stay at home with the twins, although we all understood that this choice was dictated not so much by maternal care as by the realization that she could no longer count on free childcare. "She's learning to be a real mother," Mom said one day, during one of our conversations. Dad, for his part, was adamant. "Money decisions have consequences," he said firmly when Mom tried to talk about Dana one more time. "She is an adult woman, and if she allowed herself to offend her sister, she should understand what would follow. I'm not going to encourage this kind of behavior." The twins still asked about me sometimes, according to Mom, but Dana didn't try to establish contact. I missed them, their ringing laughter, the way they climbed onto my lap with books, their naive but so sincere questions. But I knew I needed to keep my distance right now. Maybe when they get older, we'll have a relationship that won't be entangled in their mother's manipulations. In the meantime, I was building my own life. A trip to Italy gave me not only memories of infinitely beautiful streets and the taste of real ice cream, but also something more important, the confidence that I can be independent, that I don't have to let others control my choices. My new apartment became a symbol of this new beginning, a space where I could be myself, where no one appeared without warning with regular requests and demands. One evening, when my friends and I were sitting in a cozy restaurant at our traditional meeting, looking at their faces, at the light smiles that lit up their features, I realized how much my life had changed lately. "Do you know what's the best part?" I asked, smiling. They looked at me questioningly, and I, warming a cup of tea in my palms, replied, "The fact that I finally feel like I'm living my own life, and not just existing as a minor character in someone else's." They looked at each other, smiled, and Sarah, raising her glass, said with a smile, "To a new life, Eva." We clinked glasses, and at that moment I felt like I was really starting to live. Sometimes I find myself feeling guilty about how things turned out, about the family rift, about my father's intransigence, about the twins growing up without an aunt. But then I remember my ruined passport, I remember the premeditation and calculated cruelty behind this act, and I realize that if Dana has lost something, then I have gained something much more valuable. I've found my freedom,